I can check if it says we're live. Yeah, we're live. What episode is this?
I cannot see that we're live. Oh yeah, we are live.
I go watch it. Save.
Yep. It says EP 21 though.
I'll switch it. Just say
Uh,
SEC edition. As this is the SEC edition, ladies.
yes, this is episode 23. Welcome in, y'all. Sorry, we're having some issues with getting our live started. Hope that's okay. Sorry, you guys, but we are back in. This is the SEC edition, episode 23 of the Beyond the Stat podcast. So we said in the last episode when we predicted the conference championships, released our Beefer poll, our power rankings, and did all of that national championship predictions, that we'd be doing a deep dive into each conference in the 4 weeks before the season started. This is the first week. This means SEC time. So today we're going to be getting into contenders, the tiers of the SEC, talking about some key players, talking about some key coaches, and what team, a dark horse team that we think is going to do better than Vegas has it or than is commonly accepted. So we're going to get into that with the tiers, which would be great if Kirtan can pull that up. But
Yep. So just a
we've got
quick,
graphics, yeah.
and just a quick disclaimer. So we're trying to keep these episodes short and sweet. We're now for the oncoming weeks. We're going to be breaking into just each conference, getting you prepared for the season right before it kicks off. Go watch last episode to go see our Beefer poll because that was amazing. And now we're on this one, talking all SEC. So yeah, I'll bring it up. So we broke this down into a tier list, everyone. Tier list is created of all the teams in the SEC, as you can see here on the screen. And so, yeah, so let's get started. Kieran, where are we going to place Georgia?
Well, Georgia's got to go in the winners tier. They're one of the favorites to win the conference. I think they easily can win the conference, and therefore they've got to go in that top tier. Look to Carson Beck. He played great last year. I was watching some film on him last night. Looks great. Their whole offense really looks good. They've lost some key pieces, Brock Bowers, Lad McConkey, that really made the difference for them last year. But they've still got Tate Ratledge and those big boys up front. And they have what should be a slightly improved, I think, running back room. So look for them to lean a little more ground game and hopefully be able to replace those weapons with new guys that they've brought in. They've got great tight ends again, and they look to be having a solid wide receiver year as well. And then obviously on defense, Malachi Starks. Got to watch out. Their linebacker core, that was a bit of a weakness last year, and so was up front. Hopefully that'll be better for Georgia. You always know they're going to have guys there. Just the question is can they perform well? I think they can. That's why they're in the winners tier.
Yeah. And just to further on that, this game for Georgia now, Georgia's now had their second quarterback, meaning out of the tier list of quarterbacks, Georgia in this era of them winning has gone from Jake Fromm, Stetson Bennett. Now we're on Carson Beck, which is like our third generation of a quarterback. And he is more of, I feel like, a field general. He doesn't really pass as much as his main targets are already gone, and he's lost a lot of wide receivers, whether that be from like Adonai Mitchell, who Stetson Bennett used to have, to Brock Bowers, who just got drafted to the Raiders. So now this game is really going to be played in the trench, like Kieran said. Georgia is always, always, always credited with having one of the best O lines and just having really strong, skillful, big men in the trench, and excluding. Why are you looking at me like that? That's crazy. Pause. Um, and so now with the addition of Trevor Etienne, younger brother of Travis, you're going to have a really, really solid run game, and you're going to be able to open up a lot of big gaps. He's going to be able to make big runs. It's going to go so well for them. And then on defense, too, like Kieran said, linebacker position was a little weak, but the good thing about Georgia is Georgia's always able to restock, get back some of the players. So, of course, you have an insane secondary topped by Malachi Starks. Now your linebacker positions have been almost certified and been vetted to be better. And your defensive line, I feel like Georgia has one of the best defensive line coaches and just programs in general. And they're always being able to bring in top recruits, top players, and just build upon them, improve them. So honestly, they have to be one of your favorites to go in and win. Now, moving on, we have the Auburn Tigers. Kieran, where do we see them falling?
They're kind of in the middle of the pack, bottom feeders, but I'd have to say they're middle of the pack. I think they've got a decent team this year. That's really all I could kind of say. Um, they were able to run the ball really well last year. At times, their offensive line was able to get great push. A lot of those guys are back, so look to see that again. They really struggled in the passing game. They still have Peyton Thorne. Don't know why, they still got him. Hopefully, he'll be able to take a step forward. Maybe Hugh Freeze sees something in him, and he'll be able to take a step forward at Auburn, and hopefully get a little bit more comfortable, bedded into the system so they could get some more passing yards to hopefully raise their point total so they can beat some more teams. And in terms of defense, solid team, nothing really to write home about, but hopefully Auburn will be able to make a bowl game, solid season, good enough.
Yeah. And yeah, Kieran said it right on the head. I don't think Auburn's going to have the best season. Of course, we're talking about the SEC. We are arguably talking about the best. This might not be even arguable, but we're talking about the best conference in all of NCAA football. Um, and so when you look at the teams that are on here, we got teams Georgia, Texas, Bama. Auburn is of course going to take is going to have to take a backseat to some of these teams. Now we're not saying that they're going to have a horrible season, that they're going to be at the bottom few, but we're saying that they're going to stay on a steady trajectory. They're going to grow very slowly, very gradually, and so for right now, followed by their senior quarterback Peyton Thorpe, they're going to have a great season. I think that they're just going to be a middle of the pack team, meaning they're going to win their out of conference games and they're going to struggle with the ones that they have to really play. Georgia, Iron Bowl included, stuff like that. So we see them falling to the middle of the pack. Alrighty, we got Texas A&M, Kieran. Your favorite team, where are they going?
I think they're a spoiler. They're really dangerous this year. Skilled quarterback, good weapons, disruptive defense. I mean, it's going to be really, really hard to deny Texas A&M this year. And I think that they have the chance to play the upset, especially in that late season game against Texas. They've got early season games against big, big opponents, and there's a chance that they could take a couple of them down. Now, we're not trying to predict their record or anything, but I definitely think that Texas A&M has that 9-3 potential. I'm not sure they'll reach it, but there's definitely some hurdles that they could clear in tremendous fashion and some giants that they could topple just due to having two things: disruptive defense and good quarterback. That is really what makes a spoiler, and you'll see that that's kind of a pattern throughout. They've got a really good linebacker core. Their defensive line looks to be a step back from last year, but still pretty good, and they will definitely give teams troubles.
Yeah. Another reason why we put them in spoiler is they almost have that they have that underdog mentality. So of course we know that A&M's taken many losses at many different positions, including the transfer portal, including just the big fall off that they've had since I believe 3 years ago when they were sitting at number 6. And so now it's when they're starting to reclimb the hill. They're on their up and up. And like Kieran said, I feel like they're really gonna have a successful season, even with the tough schedule they have. Their first game, they open to Notre Dame, and I believe it's gonna be played in Kyle Field. That atmosphere is gonna be so electric. You're gonna have this honestly, it's not gonna be the game of the week, but it's a really, really fun game that I bet you lots of people are gonna tune into. And I feel like this is where A&M makes their stand. You're at home, you're feeling pumped, you're going against a team that's arguably probably going to be another playoff contender. And if you know deep down, if you beat them, then you have a solid shot for the rest of the season. You're going to set the tone. And then when it comes to other games, when they have to play Missouri, when they get into later in the season, LSU, Auburn, Texas, they're going to have this feeling, this almost pride to them. That's basically, we're back and we're here for glory. So we think they're going to be a spoiler. The only reason we have them down here and not super high up in contender is, again, on some of these games, the LSU game on maybe on their Ole Miss Mizzou game, they're just not. They weren't at the level that these other teams were last year, and so for that reason, we do see them falling a little bit short of where the contenders are. Okay, next up we got a team which everyone knows got a new coach, but still the same old tradition. Kieran, where are we putting them?
They've got to be in contenders. They are definitely a contender, but you cannot be sure about exactly how it's going to go. And just the transition, the monumental change that swapping Nick Saban for Kalen DeBoer is going to have. So there's a chance I can see them winning the title, but also they have struggled to replace some pieces, and there's a chance they could fall to 9-3, maybe even as low as 8-4. But they've got very solid returning quarterback, got solid wide receiver play. Some of my favorite guys, Isaiah Bond did transfer out, but they still have good guys in that core ready to fight and really be able to make an impact on offense. In terms of the defensive side of the ball, this is where my concerns lie. They have and will have good defensive backs. I don't know who's playing linebacker for them. It seems like it's kind of bounced around. They lost a linebacker to Texas. They've had some losses there, and they've lost massively along the defensive line. But it looks like, and Alabama always will be, a reload, not rebuild team, which should make them have at least a little bit of a chance for the conference title. They've got a rough game against Georgia. They've got what could be a rough game against Tennessee, a rough game potentially against Missouri, and then LSU. So their schedule is not easy, but it's an SEC schedule, so it can't be. But they definitely are in the hunt for the championship.
Yeah, and Kieran said that perfectly. The biggest change, we always talk about it. It's just when you have a coaching change, especially of one of probably this is probably the biggest coaching change that happened in the last 20 years because you're literally getting rid of your number one guy, the cream of the crop, the coach of the entire NCAA college football scene, and now you're replacing him with a guy that has a little different philosophy. Maybe he's more offensive minded than Nick Saban was. Maybe he's not as focused on the defense, and so of course there's a change at what I'm trying to say is since this big of a change is occurring, and we know that Bama is typically a winner and are basically winners every single year. This change could lead to some slip ups, to some trips, and you can see them falling. You know that when they play LSU, they might have a bad game. It's just we think that they're going to fall a little bit downhill, like any team would when they have such a colossus change happen.
All right. Yeah. So moving to Florida, they've really just got to be. I think it's another middle of the pack team. You can make an argument that they're a spoiler, but their schedule is just so rough. It's more likely that they're going to fall to the middle of the pack. They have, I think, one of the most underrated quarterbacks, and they've got what will always be. They did lose one of their top wide receivers, but it looks like they will be able to replenish that. Their defense is going to be solid. It's Florida. You can rely on that. And they are really, I think people are just sleeping on them just a little bit. And I'll talk about this a little later. But I think there's a chance that they go and they get some big wins and they make it happen, even in November, just because, I mean, the pressure, it's all on the line. It is all on the line for that program this year. Kirtan?
Yeah, and honestly, I would disagree on you on the one fact. Of course, we came up with this together, so I agree that they're going to be a middle of the pack team. They're not going to be able to be this super giant, but I think that they're going to slowly build, and especially with the draft classes that they've been having, they're going to build better and better teams. You have a very, very good young player in DJ Lagway sitting the bench behind Graham Mertz, learning the playbook, kind of like an Arch Manning type deal. And that's a good thing about Florida. Florida's going to be able to develop the talent in their own building, have their players learn, follow the scheme they want. So that's a good thing about them. That's why they're going to have talent in the future. But as of right now, they're in the middle of the pack. The one thing I said I would disagree with Kieran is I do agree with the part when he said that they're going to have some wins in November. I really do believe so. But I feel like it's not a must-win situation, which Kieran was building on. I feel like it's almost a nothing-to-lose situation. Now, maybe for their coach, it's a must-win, or I'm essentially losing my job. I'm getting fired. It's going to be a reset. But for the players, you're going into the season with the ideal that everyone has written us off. Everyone said the moment we walk into November and get into real SEC games, it's over for us. We're coming in last. We're coming second to last. We're not going to do great. But that almost gives you a feeling like, what is there to lose? It's almost a feeling that you have on every single sport, on every single level. The feeling that, look, if there's no pressure, then I'm almost going to perform better to some degree. And so I see them coming out of a couple of these games in November. Maybe it's against Texas, maybe that's against Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss, whoever they play in November. I feel like they're going to win one, and it's going to be a big shocker. Honestly, if you ask me right now, I would say probably the most likely game they're going to win is Georgia, because you're in November. You know it's going against the number one team. You got nothing to lose. It's a rivalry. Like, that is the perfect brewing for a storm to happen on the scene of the largest cocktail party. So we have them in the middle of the pack, but do expect them to potentially be a dark horse. Alrighty, I know that was a lot about Florida, but let's get to a blue collar team, literally the blue team, the Kentucky Wildcats.
Yep, solid football team, well coached, will run the ball. Brock Vandegrift looks to be good. Chip Trainum looks to be good. They belong in the middle of the pack. Kirtan, what are you doing?
Putting a
Not much
little,
to say about Kentucky.
yeah,
They'll be a solid football team. Wouldn't necessarily want to play them. Not the end of the world if you have to, though. So,
yeah.
Kirtan.
Well said. You got great new additions. Chip Trainum, quarterback is always going to be a great feel, but again, they are the most solid team there is, because I feel like there's such a big gap between them and Georgia, but then there's also such a big gap from them and Vandy. Like, they're so much of a better squad. So I feel like if you want a middle of the pack team, it is Kentucky. Not much left to say about them. It's just they are going to be a solid team probably for years to come. I honestly don't see them breaking into spoilers, or maybe they break into spoilers, but I don't see them becoming a contender anytime soon in the relevant future. Anyways, LSU, are we putting them up here, or here?
Contenders, man. Well, I think LSU's got to be in spoilers with their hated rival. It's really, I think they should be a contender. They could be a contender, but I still have questions about their defense. It's an improved staff, and they have guys there, but I just don't trust it, man. I cannot. I've been scarred by LSU's defense before, and it could scar me again, and that's why I think they've got to go in spoilers. If their defense has a good night, could be a great team. If their defense doesn't have a great night, they're more towards Vandy than Georgia.
Yeah, and LSU by all means is a very solid squad. You have arguably the number one offensive player or offensive lineman in the entire game in Will Campbell. You have a fresh quarterback in I forgot how to pronounce the name, Nusa Meyer
Garrett Nussmeier.
Nussmeyer. Yep. I feel like they are just the most solid squad you can have. They are always up there in contender for the last couple of years. But again, big changes occurred. And of course, we're talking about the quarterback position. Garrett's going to be taking the reins for the first time, no longer sitting the bench behind Jalen Daniels. And so, of course, there are some things that you have to expect from LSU. Like, they're always going to be great. But with the new quarterback and with the new scheme, with new wide receivers, it's always up in the air. You really don't know what's going to happen. And so for that reason, we have them on the same level as A&M, because when you look at who are they closely similar, who are they most similar to, it's probably A&M. And so that's going to make for a great game come later in the season. Alrighty. Now we have probably the surprise team of last year, the Mizzou Tigers.
Yep, got to be a contender. I
Oh,
mean, if Mizzou makes it happen, Mizzou makes it happen. And I really think they've got a great quarterback wide receiver duo and Brady Cook and Luther Burden. Solid, very, very solid. They had a defense that was good enough for them to win. The question that last year, and I think will be again this year, the question for me is, can Cody Schrader's production be replaced? It's crazy that he didn't go drafted to me. To me, he was one of the best picks of the draft if he had been drafted, no matter where he went. And it's really a shame, but they're going to have to replace that production. And you have to look at who's behind them. They didn't have any big name transfers in, but I have confidence that Missouri will be able to give the ball to three or four guys, spread out the load, and They're not going to bring back Schraderia, but they will make it happen.
Yeah. Okay. Just to build up on that, Missouri, great season last year. You're bringing back. Your coach literally said after the bowl game that you played again and beat Ohio State, and he's basically saying that we're trying to rebuild on what we had. He's trying to play everyone. He's trying to bring back all the players that want to be brought back. And I feel like you're going to go into the season with a lot of confidence. I'm a big believer in almost the morale of a team and how morale kills if you don't have it, and morale is amazing when you do. I know both me and Kieran experience the high highs in when we play, and then the extreme lows when we play, and so it's almost like that. I feel like this team is right now sitting on a very high high. They feel like they're gonna win. They know that they're capable of it now. They know they can battle with these big dog players like Bama, like Georgia, Ohio State for a reason. And so you know that you're up there and you know that you can win. And I feel like you're going to go into that season, especially with a seasoned quarterback, and you're going to have high expectations of yourself. And I do believe that they're going to be able to push through and get all the way up to where they want to be and make the playoffs, of course. Okay, now we have the team known as the transfer portal winners, the Ole Miss Rebels.
Yeah, they're also a contender. Um, Again, they've put all their chips. Lane Kiffin has put on his mirrored sunglasses and looked at his cards, saw a Walter Nolan and a Jackson Dart, and has shoved all his chips into the center, and he's really betting on this year. The question is do they flop or does it go smooth like a river, really? The poker references are just coming fast and furious today. But the the question, it just, to me, it's how do the transfer players mesh in? If they mesh in well, top team. If they don't mesh in well, if they don't fit with the culture and there's a clash, not a top team, right? It really is. That's the line to me. That is the crucial difference. They will play well on offense. They have lost big production at running back to Ohio State, but I think they've still got a shot at being one of the best teams in the SEC. And I think certainly if a couple of balls bounce their way, they could find themselves in Atlanta in the conference championship.
Yeah. And I distinctly remember the game Ole Miss played against Georgia last year, and I remember watching the post game interview with Lane Kiffin, and he put emphasis on the idea that they beat us only because they had these talented kids that they could rotate in, unlike us who basically were stuck to our starters, and then once we have our starters, there's a big fall off. Now, of course, with the portal coming into play, Ole Miss has built a really solid squad. Walter Nolan, like Kieran said, Jackson Dart, who's been there. But now they have the players in the position that they need, and they have multiple of them. So if one gets tired, they can throw another guy in there, and he's just as good as the last. And so now this is the team that I believe has the biggest make it or break it season. As I feel like if I was the Ole Miss Rebels athletic director, I'd almost tell Lane Kiffin, like, this is your biggest opportunity and do not let this fail because it's your job. If you put all your chips into this transfer portal, gave all these guys probably lots of money to come over here, if you were trying to build a program and it totally flops on you, if you start losing easy games, I feel like, as Kieran said, poker references, I feel like you're right now playing Texas Hold'em. You got the big blind right now as a Ole Miss fan. You really don't know what to expect from the flop. You really don't know what's going to go on. You don't know how much to bet, and you see all these other teams, Georgia, Bama, all these other teams raising you 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 at some extent, and you don't know how to play it. It's literally what's going to go on the season. Either you're going to hit big and you're going to hit that royal flush, and you're going to be at the top of the conference, or you're honestly going to hit maybe you'll even hit with a straight, but then Georgia will come in with a flush, or maybe you might not even hit at all and just lose everything. So they have the biggest high and then the biggest low in the sense that if they really do mesh together, like Kieran was saying, they're going to be a top team. But everything can come crumbling down come week 1, 2, 3 when we really see what they're like. And it's going to be a whirlwind of a season, especially for Ole Miss if they cannot get everybody to be on the same page. Alrighty. Moving on, we got OU. We got the Go Sooners. Boomer Sooners.
Yeah, so OU's a spoiler. Again, what did I say? What did I say about Texas A&M that made them a spoiler? Good quarterback play, disruptive defense. OU in a nutshell. They will have a good quarterback. He's new, but he'll get in there and you know he can make some plays because you saw it in the bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got a solid defense. Their defense struggled a little bit last year, but they've got a good roster and they can be disruptive. Example, that Red River rivalry game that y'all saw last year. I know I did, and then I had to look away. It made me very, very sad. But that was what it was, and they could be a spoiler. They could do what they did last year again. Oklahoma has spoiler in its name almost. That
Yeah.
OU might as well be an S. They're really, really good at ruining teams' days. And that's what they have the potential to do this year. And they could be, again, like last year, a 10-win spoiler. And to me, that really is the peak of Oklahoma football this year. Maybe if they spoil enough games, they'll become a contender. But right now, I think it's solid to put them in spoilers.
Yeah. Um, Not much to add to what Kieran said. Kieran was right on the fact that they have a really solid, destructive D line, and they have a good quarterback based off of what we've seen from Jackson Arnold in last season's bowl game. The big thing with OU, I feel like, is OU is almost in a similar boat to another team, A&M, and it's almost like they've been written off this year. They've been written off saying like, "Oh, you got to host Bama. Oh, you got to worry about the Red River rivalry," and it's almost been like the moment that both these teams joined the SEC, it's felt like people have held Texas to this standard and held OU to like this standard. And it's like I feel like that gap isn't that big of a difference, especially because in the last 20 meetings or last 10 meetings of these teams, I believe OU's won 7 of them, and Texas has only won 3 in the Red River rivalry in the last 10 years. And I feel like they're being written off. So I feel like they're going to come into the season with that feeling like, hey, we may have been written off, but we didn't write back. Uh, Stuff like that. I feel like they're going to come in, they're going to play with their hearts. Again, we know exactly how destructive they can be when they play to their top performance against Texas. And I feel like they're a team that, yeah, they're going to spoil your season. I feel like if they host Missouri, if they host Bama, which I know they will, it might be a shock for Bama, and they might get that welcome to the Big 12 treatment for once. But we'll see how that goes. Anyways, now I'm pretty sure Kieran's going to have a fun time talking about his next team, which belongs right up there.
That's outrageous, man. Even from you, that's a little low. Yeah, that's where they belong. I think Texas and Georgia are just a little bit of a cut above. I have genuine questions about every team. I have one genuine question about Texas and Georgia. I have two genuine questions about Alabama, Missouri, and Ole Miss. Three about LSU, Oklahoma, and A&M, and 4+ about everybody else. Right? But Texas, to me, they've got potential questions at, I would say, at that other linebacker spot beside Anthony Hill, and a little bit of questions in the secondary as well as the wide receiver room. But the big question is the wide receiver room. That is what to me will define it. If they can have a quality second target, I think the secondary will be better. They've recruited well. They have people. I've seen the spring football. They will be fine at linebacker. Anthony Hill, good as Jalen Ford, maybe better. Um, they will be really good along the defensive line. Everyone says the question is the defensive tackles. I don't think it is. I think that this year you have what I think is probably the best edge rushing group in all of college football, just in terms of having depth. You have Ethan Burke, you've got Barron Sorrell, you have Colin Simmons, who is a true freshman, but you know he can get after it. And I saw, again, that spring game footage. And then you've got Trey Moore, the transfer in. You have 4 guys who would start almost anywhere else, I think. And then you also have guys deeper than that. You have a huge roster of defensive tackles all itching to be the next Tavondre Sweat. And really, I think the defense is very solid. And where I have questions is the freshman wide receivers that are going to have to get thrown in there. So that is my big question for Texas. And therefore, they also belong in the winners column. because I see Georgia winning in the most situations, the most percentage, and then Texas the second most percentage of the SEC if I have to ask myself.
Yeah. The way I would look at this is basically you look at every team on this list and you say, where is your flaw? And honestly, when it comes to Georgia and Texas, their flaws, they may have some, but they're not as big as the flaws that a team like Tennessee might have, like a team like OU, like A&M has. And I feel like another good way to tell is you look at the questions. Is there any question that any of these teams that you could ask about any of these teams that they don't have an answer to? And I don't think so. Texas, honestly, I think might be the most well-rounded team in the SEC, more than Georgia, on the fact that I think they have a specialty at every single position. Of course, the biggest questions that were raised were how are you going to fill that secondary because that secondary got cooked by Washington? What's going to happen with the wide receiver room after you lost two of your top tier talents? Well, they have an answer for both of those. First off, you can say we signed Andrew Makuba. Andrew Makuba transferred from Clemson over to Texas. That's one solution that they brought in to shore up that secondary because we know Makuba was amazing. Another one was the flipping of Xavier Filasami. He's a true freshman, but he was one of the top, if not the top, cornerbacks in all of the nation last year. And he's going to make an instant impact when he gets to play. Another question that we brought up was wide receiver room. What's going on with that? Well, of course, you can say you lost Xavier Worthy, lost Adonai Mitchell. Well, you did steal Isaiah Bond from Bama, which was an amazing pull, as he is a top wide receiver. Again, we've seen what he did in the playoff games. We saw what he did against Georgia in the SEC championship. Another guy that everyone sleeps on is Jonte Cook. Jonte Cook, I remember first watching him in a Destroying video when Destroying went to go tour with him. And I mean, this guy, Jonte Cook, I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, but I believe he went to IMG Academy. I mean, just double check real fast. Oh, no, went to DeSoto. But I do remember him going through like a whole tour with Destroying, talking about where he's going to land. And he's been watching, he hasn't stepped on the field, but he's been watching these players play, like at his position, Xavier Worthy included. And that spring game, I remember just keeping my eye on number one. And number one was so explosive off the ball. He looked hungry to play, and he looked like he wanted the ball so much. And so that's a great second option right there because I think Jonte Cook is going to be slept on. Um, yeah, honestly, Texas doesn't have that many flaws. And of course, we saw that last year, and we saw that with both the top three teams that we listed: Georgia, Texas, Bama. And so, for that reason, they have to be a national championship contender, and of course, a top two in the SEC. Alrighty, let's talk Tennessee football. So we all know that Tennessee is a great program, especially in the last couple of years. And now with Nico Yamaleva being everything that he's been cracked up to be, we do believe that he is going to be up there in the championship contender tier list. Kieran, why would you put him there?
Well, because I think Tennessee, they're a little more than a spoiler to me. They have star power at quarterback. I think he'll develop very nicely, get even better as the season goes on. And then they have solid pieces on defense. They have James Pierce Jr. They've got really just a good group of guys that I think is poised to have a season like what you saw 2 years ago with Hendon Hooker. I mean, really, they had the number one offense in the country then. I don't think they'll get that high this year, but they could get close. And that's enough to where if a few balls bounce their way, if Amalieva makes a great throw, if James Pierce Jr. gets a sack, I mean that is what will change the game. And because Tennessee is already close, I think that's what can push them over the edge. Those two specifically, those two elite players, and can topple them into the group with Alabama, with Mizzou, with Ole Miss, and with those top teams in the SEC.
Yeah. And just to build on that, Tennessee is always a top team. They've been a top team since Peyton Manning days, and they're consistently at the top of their game. Um, I feel like they're just going to be a big problem, especially with Nico being all that he's been cracked up to be, playing outstanding in the bowl games. I think that they're going to be a top tier contender. They're going to rival teams like Missouri. They're going to rival teams with LSU, especially because they have all the factors going their way. A top program, at Top Stadium, a feared team to go into and especially play in Volunteer Stadium. It's gonna be such a great time to watch, and they're gonna be another sleeper team that no one's gonna have picked for winning. But honestly, if you ask me right now, who do you have winning the entire thing? You have to be in some order of like Georgia, Texas, Bama, Tennessee, Ole Miss, A&M, Missouri, LSU, and then down the line. But I do think they're up there and they're going to be a slept-on team. Alrighty,
Yeah.
let's go to the Bulldogs next. Not the Georgia Bulldogs, but rather the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Where are they going?
Yeah, so they're on the line between bottom feeder and middle of the pack, but I think they've got to go in middle of the pack. To me, it's a look at this, a bold rebellion from my compatriot. Um, I think that they have a chance to go 7-5, maybe even 8-4. They have a new offense. They've got a who looks to be a good quarterback. They have almost everything it takes. You have that feeling they just need a couple of breakout players and they're all off to the races. They could be a dangerous team. They're not quite a spoiler, but I think Jeff Lebby is poised to have a good first year. The expectations are low, but the number of wins could be, relatively speaking, pretty high.
Yeah, and I think the reason why they deserve to be in the middle pack and bottom feeder tier is personally, if you ask me to make a tier list, I would honestly put them below some of these teams. I'd put them at the bottom of middle of the pack. But Kieran is right. They do have a whole new system under Jeff Levy, and he looks like he wants to revitalize this offense. He's going to try to decimate everything that was put last year and bring in a new, better, almost just a better offense as possible. But there are lots of questions on the defensive front, like what's going to happen with the defense, especially like how they average so like many points, in the sense that they were allowing so many teams to score on them and run up the score. And the question is, how do you prevent that? How do you stop them from rushing on you? How do you play at the lineman position? And it's just a lot of questions on defense. But the one thing that Mississippi State can look forward to is Jeff Lebby trying to revitalize this offense. Okay, now we have my favorite ranking. We have Vandy. Kieran, do they belong up here? Because I feel like they do. They're the
Well,
stars.
there's literally something with their name on it, and it's the Vandy tier. I am so sorry, Vandy. I would like you to know that we are both nerds. Therefore, we feel your pain. We understand what it's like to not be great at football, and we understand what it's like to be a nerd. So, sorry, Vandy, but you've got to be in the Vandy tier. You're not going to win an SEC game. I'm sorry. But, maybe if you move conferences, the ACC is looking real promising, man. I'm telling you. You could just make that switch, become a contender, maybe, get that rebuild going, and put Vanderbilt football back where it always should be, on the bottom. But that's where they are, and yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, I would say Vandy is most similar to a little high school known as Lhasa, in the fact that they have very, very, very smart players or very smart just students, unlike Bama, Georgia, and Tennessee or Ole Miss. Basically, they're the smartest of the group, of course, in their district and in their conference. They also don't like to play football and don't have the numbers to play football, as not that many people want to say that they go to Vandy to play football. So that's another reason. And the third reason is that honestly, if I was the dean of admissions and if I was just the dean of Vanderbilt, I would look at these games and say, I feel unsafe for my students to play against these other teams and get scored on 100 million times. I would make them move non-district. I would make them move over to the ACC, and I'd probably say, maybe let's go move. Maybe not to the ACC. Let's go move to Mountain West. Maybe let's go move to USA because maybe we're going to be the stars over there. We're going to play teams that might be a million miles away, Houston, Dallas, but we're still going to be contending, and we're still going to have a fun trip back and forth. So, Vandy, you're in your own category, in your little bubble, which no one will mess with you.
All right.
Alrighty,
Vandy in
number
a
two.
class of its own.
Yep,
Yeah,
and
so
now there's two.
yeah.
Kieran,
Arkansas put them in bottom feeders.
dang.
So I debated putting them as a spoiler because they did beat Texas a couple of years back, but that was back when Texas wasn't very good at football, which was for a while. Um, they could potentially play the absolute complete bomb and on anybody's schedule, but I don't really think they have the hogs to do it. I just think that they're going to come up a little short and win 4 games.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think they're going to come up short. I feel like Arkansas in this moment just needs, or they don't need it, but like, how's the best way to describe it? Their expectation is to win 4 games at this point. They essentially know that they're going to have a guaranteed win over Vanderbilt, and then they're basically saying, "Okay, guys, after we beat Vanderbilt, let's just work in the off season. Great season, everybody. We came up very short, but that's what we expect." That's what you can expect from the Razorbacks. I don't see them moving anytime soon. They're going to be on this gradual increase, like Mississippi State, like I said, like Kentucky, but their increase is starting from bottom of the hill, where people, again, it's like the Vanderbilt situation. People don't want to say that they play for Arkansas, especially now. They used to like 4 years ago, but now Arkansas has really become forgettable, and it's like that awkward cousin that you have during Thanksgiving that just sits on his phone, and anytime you try to talk to him, he just like skedaddles away. And then Vanderbilt in this situation would be like maybe the pet dog, and then Georgia would be like maybe like the forgot the word, but it'd probably be like the head of the family household. Same thing with Texas, and you'd have all your fun cousins, which would be spoilers. You'd have your weird uncles and aunts that are like your middle of the pack. Your bottom feeder would be like, yeah, your weird cousin that you don't talk to, that one guy, and then Vandy is just Vandy. So not much to describe them, except for I guess I can say that they're basically like the pet dog at that point. Um, all right, let's get it out the way. Who is the bottom feeder, Kieran?
South Carolina, I'm sorry. I love Beamer Ball. I really do, y'all. But you weren't good last year, and I don't see any reason you would be better this year. I think you're still sitting at the bottom of the SEC, and I think that's just how it has to be. Sorry, South
Yeah,
Carolina.
and especially since you lost Spencer Rattler, he was basically the only thing going for you at that point. Because I mean, Spencer Rattler was pretty funny on that TV show, Next QB Up or whatever it was. And then he got booed out of Oklahoma, and then he got moved to South Carolina, and then South Carolina type football, sitting at the bottom feeder, being the second worst team, if not the third worst team. You might have a better season. Um, yeah, you're not doing anything. No one really cares for you. Yeah, that's about it. See you, South Carolina. Anyways, this was our final tier list. We're going to do the same thing for the Big Ten. We're going to do the same thing for the ACC, all of the conferences that you need to know about. But yes, tell us what you think in the comments. Tell us if you think one of the bottom feeders needs to be a winner. Tell us if Texas needs to be where the conference championship contenders are. Tell us if Georgia just needs to be where Vandy is and Vandy needs to be our kings at the top. Because honestly, I'm rooting for them. But yeah, that's about it for this part of the podcast. Now let's get to our final moments of the SEC.
Yeah, so yeah, our faces are big again, I know. Um we've got a couple of things to go through, and we're gonna start with Dark Horse. So Kirtan, who is your dark horse in the SEC?
Okay. For Dark Horse, I have selected the Gigums. Yes, indeed. The Aggies, I'm saying are the dark horse. Again, I said this earlier, but I think Aggie Land needs a break, needs to climb that hill again. They were once at that high position of 6. Then they had a torrential downfall. But now they're back. They may have lost some pieces like Walter Nolan after Jimbo Fisher got fired, but I feel like Mike Elko is going to build a winning program, and I feel like this year will really be the breakout year. They're going to get back on that level of Texas, and now the fact that Texas is in the SEC, that's just going to add to the rivalry. That's just going to add to the wanting to play at the same level, and I see them rising to the occasion. Kieran, who would you say?
Yeah, so I have Florida. I think Florida's a dark horse. I think they have a roster that is good enough to really make it happen. And I think that they've got potential, man. There is a chance that they could win more games, win 7 games, win 8 games, make that happen, beat some really strong SEC competition by having a good enough roster and being in the right place at the right time. So my dark horse has to be Florida. They're really under hype, but keep an eye on them.
Okay. Um, Moving on, we have Offensive Player of the Year. Kieran, who'd you put at Offensive Player of the Year?
Um, well, I had to go with. I think he's going to be Offensive Player of the Year. I went with Brady Cook. I think there's a chance if he has a really strong season that he could really pop off and make it happen, man.
Yeah. And I put the same. I put Brady Cook / Jackson Dart. I feel like both these guys are going to be one of the top quarterbacks in the league. I feel like they're going to be outstanding to some extent, and they're really going to set the tone and raise their teams to the occasion. Alrighty. Moving on, we got Defensive Player of the Year. Kieran, kick us off.
Yeah, so for me, I thought about it and there were a lot of names that came up, but in terms of who I think is going to be the biggest impact this year, I think it's got to be Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma. Good linebacker. I have seen him miss many a tackle, but he has gotten better. And improvement is what it's all about. And if he improves on last year, he could be a very, very solid stalwart there in the middle of the field for the Oklahoma Sooners. And therefore, I've got to pick him for Defensive Player of the Year in the SEC.
Yeah, and I have the exact same. I have Danny Stutzman. I think he's going to be an outstanding linebacker. He's going to be one of the guys that might not be on a stronger team, but he's still going to play up to expectations. And actually, he's going to exceed expectations, especially for his team and for himself. And he's going to be crowned your Defensive Player of the Year. Okay, and lastly, we have your Coach of the Year. Kieran, who are we putting at the coach position?
You know, there are two people who I think should get a shout for this. One is Mike Elko. I think he's a very solid pick for Coach of the Year. Could be great, could do really, really good things. The second one, I think, is Jeff Lebby. They could both have a great first year, improve their teams, and really get them back on track to where those teams want to go.
Yep. And I have Mike Elko the same. I think that if you're taking a program and you're going to raise it to the level that I believe that they're going to get to, you deserve to be Coach of the Year. All these other coaches have almost a similar agenda, but if we take the ideas of Lane Kiffin, Kirby Smart, Steve Sarkisian, even Kalen DeBoer, all these head coaches, their expectation is to win, and anything short of that is a failure into that to some degree. And so with Mike Elko, if he can raise A&M back to the top, that's just improve. That's exceeding expectations to some degree. And honestly, I'm going to keep this trend going into our bold predictions. Kieran, do you want to start? Or do you want me to start with the bold predictions?
I think you got to lead it, man. You got to tee it up.
Yeah.
You already did.
Keeping on the idea of Texas A&M, we're going to continue. I'm going to continue on that train. I'm going to say Texas A&M makes a playoff push. That's going to be my.
What does that mean?
Meaning they're going to make it to the playoffs.
Oh, okay. I was like, makes a playoff push. I think every team's making a playoff push. Great.
So
yeah.
Basically, what I mean is, of course, you saw last episode that I don't believe that they're going to make it, but I think a bold prediction might be that they do make it. I see a reality where they honestly start off the season so well against Notre Dame that they roll into LSU, they roll into Ole Miss, Missouri, and they start winning. And especially come that last game against Texas, if Texas goes down to A&M and Texas is ranked top 5 or higher, top 7 or higher, that's going to make a really good case for A&M being up there. And we do know that the NCAA loves to favor A&M and kick out another team. And so as of right now, I would say A&M, that's going to be a bold prediction. I don't know if it's going to come true, but I do think A&M has a chance and will make the playoffs.
All right. My bold prediction is that the Florida Gators, we're both sticking with our respective dark horse teams here, makes not one, but 2 W's in the win column in November. That is my guess. I'm not being specific as to which games, but I think that is a smoking, sizzling, absolutely hot on the Scoville boldness scale of predictions. And I think, maybe I even deserve 2 points for that one.
That is a bold prediction. We'll see. We'll make a final tally once we actually get all the episodes out to y'all and we actually upload everything and get everything sorted. Because when the season starts, no more bold predictions. Bold predictions end moment that season starts, and we just go off of the list and see what happens each week. So I would say those are 2 bold predictions. One team making the playoffs, which is not expected to happen, and one team That's not even supposed to get a win in November, and expecting to get 2 is wild. Okay, well, that wraps it up for this episode of Beyond the Snap. Hope you enjoyed the SEC edition. Expect the other conferences to occur. Kieran, any last words? Alrighty. Well, you heard it from us, folks. This has been Beyond the Snap with your 2 favorite podcasters. Yeah, we know what you think about On3 and Josh Pate. Don't even bring them up. We don't even include them. They're not nearly close to us on the tier list. They're in the Vandy tier list, and we're in the winners tier list. Anyways, that's been us. Have a great day. Alrighty. And stop stream.